Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's CPSA member-exclusive webinar on driving higher response rates and outbound call answer rates on helping sales professionals increase their contact and response rates with our benefits partner, as I mentioned, PhoneBurner. The session will be hosted by PhoneBurner's CEO, Chris Sorensen. Chris leads the development of industry-leading solutions to foster business communications and growth. He studied advertising at Washington State University and has built a career in technology, serving a diverse range of organizations. Chris has held various executive roles in revenue and partnerships, leveraging his expertise to drive a shared success for both his company
Alicia, I'm on my
and
Zoom
his
now.
client. In this 1-hour session, we'll delve deep into the intricacies of boosting your sales call answer rates and crafting bespoke strategies to secure appointments with your prospects. We'll also demystify what it takes to get people to agree to meetings and appointments by guiding you through innovative and tailored approaches that go beyond conventional methods. Now, just for some quick housekeeping rules on today, kindly note that all of our attendees have automatically been placed on mute. If you do unmute yourself, please feel free to do so at any given opportunity during our Q&A. Alternatively, you can use the chat function in your Zoom dashboard throughout the session to ask any questions or make any comments that you might have. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be distributed to all CPSA members shortly after the session concludes. And to our designated professionals on the CPSA designation pathway, we are pleased to inform you that the session does qualify for one professional development unit. Following the session, all participants will receive a personalized certificate of participation, downloadable and shareable on your LinkedIn profile. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Chris from PhoneBurner to start.
Great, thank you, Rupalin, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with everyone. Excited coming at you live from Seattle, Washington. So a little bit south of the border, but great to be with all of you. Really excited to talk about the phone today, and I believe that the phone, it's in our company's name, PhoneBurner, is absolutely one of the most powerful tools that you can use to have success in your sales career. And I would start off by saying it's probably the second most powerful tool that will put your results into hypergrowth and hyperdrive. And that most important tool that you have is the membership that you have in the CPSA. Great organization. We certainly admire a lot of the programming and the work that they do on your behalf. And I think all of you should be complimented for stepping forward and becoming members. You're signaling to your boss, to your employer, and more importantly to yourself, how committed you are to your success by joining this great organization and by taking time out of your day today to learn a little bit with us and have a great conversation about how the phone can be really helpful in accelerating the results that are meaningful to you personally and professionally, but then also driving the outcomes that your organizations are hoping that you're able to do. So it's a true honor to be able to come in today and share a little bit of time and a couple of thoughts with you all about the phone and what it can do, I think, to really help you take that next step in your career. And we obviously, as a company that focuses all on the outbound call, we realize that technology is just one small component of it. What's really important is the work that you all do with the tool in your hands. And so today we're going to talk about how we can really put some of that into just accelerated overdrive and give you a couple of tips along the way that we think are going to be really exciting. And hopefully, if we do a good job by the end of the session, you're going to want to pick up the phone and start dialing. So without any further ado, let's buckle up and get going. All right, everybody see my screen advancing here? We good? All right, what are we gonna hope to accomplish today? Well, one is I just want to, sales calls have kind of recently, come a little bit under attack, and people may be wondering, why are we still making phone calls? We're gonna talk about that a little bit, and we're gonna talk about what phone calls are up against. If you've been making phone calls, you may be struggling with or wondering, why are my connection rates so low? Why am I not able to get people on the phone? If I do get them on the phone, why is there so much resistance and hesitation to really, hearing me out? We're going to talk through some of that. I also put together for this presentation, I put together an acronym, DHONE, which I think will be the 5 irrefutable traits of an elite sales call that all of you will then be able to put into practice to really make good calls going forward. We'll talk about combining all of these things, putting it all together. And then I put the term workshop here, but what we're going to do is we're going to share some really good openers. We're going to talk about the importance of questions. If you take anything out of today, really good calibrated questions are going to be something that you're going to want to pay a lot of attention to as we get there. We're going to talk about offers. You know, when you get somebody on the phone, they've demonstrated a little bit of interest. What are the type of offers that you can put together to take that next step to advance the relationship? And then we're going to talk about how important the end of a phone call is and different things that you can get out of the phone, even if you don't get your primary objective met. So the outcomes are, we want to go really from theoretical. It's one thing to sit here and put fancy slides together and talk through these different concepts. It's another to actually put this stuff into practice. We're going to talk about how we make that transition happen. And then we're going to help you apply what you learn so that you can dominate in your industry and in your space. We want you to really feel like you're a superhero at the end of this session today, and that the phone is now your best friend, and it is absolutely the path to having the type of results that you dream about as a sales professional. So, why do we still call? Well, we believe it works, and we're not alone in that assessment. The numbers actually prove it. I'm going to share some numbers with you as why it's so important to still use the phone call. So consider these. 88% of consumers want a rich human connection with another. You know, second to face, a rich human connection is what people really want, particularly when they're in the process of understanding a purchasing decision that they need to make. They really want to be able to interact with another person. There's a lot of noise out there about, hey, we're going to get replaced with AI agents and things like that. I don't buy it. No AI agent is ever going to replace a great human salesperson, particularly somebody who's dedicated and working towards their craft. And I don't believe AI sales agents can join CPSA either. So we're gonna be able to help show you today how you will absolutely be able to dominate and beat out any type of AI competitive sales agent that's out there trying to connect with your prospects. Phone also outperforms email by 82% when people are asking for a meeting. And this is in the B2B environment, right? So if you are a business calling on other businesses, phone outperforms email by 82% when you're trying to get that meeting. We all know this. It takes multiple attempts to try to get somebody in a connection scenario, about 6 of them. Phone, when incorporated into those multi-touch points, absolutely is going to increase the likelihood of you getting that connection with the prospect over just doing simple email only strategies out there, commenting simply on LinkedIn, things like that. Phone's going to help you supercharge those results. This one's really interesting. 57% of C-level executives, let's say you've got a product or a service where you're calling up upper management, upper leadership, they prefer to be contacted via the phone over email strategies. Because why? They get so many emails a day. The statistic that I pull here shows that most C-level people get 115 business emails a day. I know as a CEO that number is probably a little bit low based on my own personal experience, but constantly having emails coming in. And I'm not saying forego email and just go straight to the phone. You want to use them in a blended strategy, but don't give up on the one tool that will get a hold of everybody. And one thing I just want to mention, we do a lot of calling to people's cell phones. Think about this for a second. No matter what you're doing on your cell phone, no matter what you're doing, you could be looking at Instagram, checking your bank balance, looking at an email, reading a news article. When a phone call comes in, it takes over the entire device. Think about that for a second. When a phone call comes in, it takes over the entire device. If you send an email, does that take over an entire device? No, it sits there in a queue waiting for you to go to. The phone is still next to knocking on somebody's door. The phone's the only tool that you have in your belt. When you dial it and you reach somebody, everything else that they've got going on that device goes to the background. That's a pretty powerful piece of technology. 85% of businesses consider the outbound call important to essential. So your peers, right? This is research that's conducted both in the States and up north in Canada. 85% of businesses consider the call important to essential for their ability to connect with prospects. All that data, all those cited down there. If you want to take a look at the presentation, some of the additional good information from those companies below. And I know that this deck will be available for you after today's meeting. So that's why we're calling. The numbers tell us it absolutely is worthwhile, and we want to continue to do it. But everything that we want is on the other side of hard. Think about that for a second. Everything we want, that meeting, that sale, getting that appointment, getting them to agree to the next step, it's all on the other side of hard. And we still do it because we know that what's on the other end of the rainbow is absolutely worth the effort to get through it. However, we are against what I call countermeasures, multiple different things that are separating your phone calls from reaching your prospects. So let's talk through a couple of those. The first countermeasure, the first thing that exists between you and your phone call right now are the thousands of apps that people can download from Google Play or the Apple App Store to put on their device that says, you know, don't let any phone call through that I don't know. And millions of people do it. Millions of people download these different apps. So you got to navigate around those apps to get those phone calls answered. The second countermeasure that's out there, and some of you may be familiar with this, is on the phone itself. If it's a Google device or an Apple device, you can silence unknown callers, which we know between 2 and 3% of people actually activate that, meaning that if a phone call comes in, it's not in your address book, or there's not an email where that phone number can be found, they send it straight to voicemail. And now Apple has followed Google and has delivered live voicemail. What live voicemail is basically you reach somebody's voicemail box. If they've got their phone in front of them, it starts to dictate and take your words and put it on the screen so that somebody can then determine whether or not they're going to pick up or they're going to decline the call. But it's a countermeasure designed to kind of filter those calls through. The other thing that's happening out there, and I know it's going on in Canada as well as it is here in the States, is because of just so many bad robocalls. We're not talking calls that we all make as salespeople, but bad robocalls. The carriers have gotten involved, and what they do is they either block the call if they don't like it, or they label the call and say, hey, it's potentially a spam call, don't answer this. And that's hard to get all of your calls through when you're starting to go against apps, you're going against what's on the phone, and you're going against what's on the carrier side of it. However, you can still win. And the way that you can still win with your sales calls is there's a series of tips and tactics that we would recommend that you take to ensure that that phone call that you're placing will successfully navigate that stream down to the device and show your phone number or your business name to the consumer. The first thing that we recommend people do is that you register your phone numbers with freecallerregistry.org. One of the providers that sponsors freecallerregistry.org actually does really good number registration in Canada. And what happens there is they say this phone number, the number that you're using to call your prospect, to call a consumer, belongs to a legitimate entity. And we're not going to likely mark that number as spam because we know who's behind it. The whole reason carriers block calls is they really don't know a lot of information about that call. And if you use Free Caller Registry, you're giving carriers critical information to make good decisions to let those calls through. Second, another way to make sure that your calls are going through is that you have great call performance. And what are some of the things that you can do to ensure that you have good call performance? One is being consistent in your outbound call volume. So these carriers put this technology on top of their network and they see your phone number. One day it makes 1,000 calls, the next day it makes 30 calls. For 3 days, it doesn't make any calls at all. It mirrors and mimics behavior of robocallers and spammers, and they're going to be more likely to label that call it spam, or maybe potentially block it. But when you're consistent, there's an expectation that's set that helps the carriers go, this is a really legitimate call. Second thing that you can do is make sure that the duration of your call, try to go for at least 30 to 60 seconds at a minimum when you get people on the phone. And we're going to talk about some tactics here shortly that will help make sure that you get longer calls. But the longer the call is, that signals to the carriers, hey, that's a wanted call because people are spending time with that the called party, which signals to us, hey, this looks like it's something legitimate and that people want it. And if possible, getting people to call you back is a really good signal. I would venture to say no one on this call has ever called back a robocall. Never. And so when the carriers don't see calls coming back into your phone number, they think, is then calls coming out of that number really wanted? So to the extent that you can get people calling you back is a really good signal that the carriers can then take and interpret that calls are wanted. Thing that you've got available to you, particularly on Rogers, and I'm not sure if the other networks have this, is that you can actually brand your calls with your business name. So if you've got a business name that is well known, you can actually go out there and have that name appear on those calls in addition to basic caller ID. And that's an option that's available to you. And if you go into free caller registry, you can get a little bit more information on how you can do that. And there's also a company, the name is hiya.com, HIYA.com, that serves a lot of the Canadian market and can help you get those calls branded up in Canada. The final thing for calls to win is you need to have a great, compelling call once you get somebody on the line, which is what we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about. So, a great phone call. I want you to understand that every single person on this call has all the ingredients necessary right now to have tremendous success in sales calls. And so, either we're hoping to reinforce what you already know, or we're hoping to provide you a couple of different tricks and tactics to ensure that you are successful in using the phone going out there. So I created an acronym for phone that I think hopefully will help just talk about how we pull some of those things off the shelf and put them together to make a great phone call. So the first letter that we're gonna explore today is P, personalized, right? Who likes to get a phone call that feels completely anonymous, that's not personalized, or more importantly, relevant to them? And so the first bit of advice I would give you is show the appropriate amount of personalization. Hi, Mary, it's Chris. Hi, Mary, how are you doing? It's Chris from Phone Burner. We're in the dialing services industry. Show the correct amount of personalization. I think that name is obviously important. Another thing that's interesting, and we coach on this for leaving live voicemails or interacting with live voicemails. Demonstrate, hey Mary, thanks for answering the phone on this Wednesday morning, right? You both share that in common, the time of day. It shows that you're not a robo-dialer, shows not that you're an AI agent, that you're applying the appropriate level of personalization. There are certainly lines that you can cross where, you know, your research, you're going in there and you're personalizing a little bit too much and you cross that creep factor. But it's always a good idea to use at least the person's first name, or if you're comfortable, using a salutation in their last name. But the appropriate level of personalization for your greeting on the call is absolutely paramount. Second component is here. This was one of my favorite lines of all time, and we teach our salespeople to apply this. Listen first to understand, and then be understood. You'll find it's amazing if your primary job is not just sitting there thinking about, I got to get my next line ready to go, but you're actively listening to what that person's saying, even if it's an objection, so that you can handle it properly and continue to navigate with the call. But phone call is a two-way form of communication. It's not just one party shouting or talking to another. It is two-way communication, and we really implore our people to make sure that they're hearing. And a good way to know if you're hearing or not is to record yourself, or if you've got a tool that will allow you to do this, look at the split ratio. Are you talking 80% of the time and your prospect's talking 20% of the time? Are you talking 50% of the time? They're talking 50% of the time? Really use, obviously, the phone call as an opportunity to listen well, so that you can understand what's going on the other side, so that then you can be understood. Next up is your offer. This is so important, and I'm going to give you a checklist in a little while here that I think will be really helpful. But when you think about your offer, you've gotten through your greeting, you've got that person on the phone, and you're going to the offer, what it is that you're trying to work with the person on. Is it compelling? Is it unique? Is it relevant? In some scenarios, is it scarce, meaning that it's exclusive only to the person that you're calling? And is it worth their time? The more you can check those boxes when you think about the offer in your script, when you're going forward and making your calls, the more success that you're going to have. Another O is objection. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but making sure that as sales professionals, we are really ready to handle the most common objections. It's not the right time, not interested, right? Too high a price. There's a bunch of different objections that come flying at you. Are you practiced up in terms of being able to handle the objections on the fly as you go through and navigate that phone call? N, navigate. This sounds silly, but it's really not. You got to know your tools. Most of us are not, and there may be a few of us are, but most of us are not dialing off of a written piece of paper and we're just crossing off every single time. We're dealing with a system in front of us. We may have our headset on when we're placing the calls. The worst thing that you can do to yourself and to your prospect is be distracted because you don't know your tools well enough. You don't know your CRM to your dialer and how they interact as well. Or you're constantly kind of to navigate through different parts of the application and you're distracted, you're not as sharp as you should be. Make sure that you know your tools and that you can navigate them so that people will not feel that you're distracted at all, because we can hear through that 100%. We don't want to come across distracted in any way, shape, or form. We want to be precise in terms of how we navigate our tools. And then finally, the last E is end, or your ending. You always want to give value and get value at the end of the call. And we're going to talk through some examples of how you can do that going forward. And I think being prepared, and at the end, you want to make sure that your next meeting or step is clearly articulated. You want to make sure that you can confirm contact information. You want to recap the value that you potentially gave them or are going to be giving them. And if it's not a fit, if it doesn't look like it's going to be alignment between both of you, always, always, always never hesitate in those scenarios to make sure that you can ask for a referral if they know somebody else that could benefit from what it is that you're offering as we get to the end. And we're going to expand on the end here in a minute a little bit more. So if you put it all together, phone is second best next to face-to-face. Knowing how your calls appear, meaning when you're using your phone number to dial out, knowing how they appear is 50% of the work to being successful. If your call is showing up as spam, if your call is blocking, it doesn't matter if you have the best script, the best offer, the best greeting. If that call's not being answered, all that works for naught. So I would encourage you to make sure that you test, that you call other devices, that you call other people and say, hey, how's my phone number appearing on your device? Know how your call appears. It's so critical. Remember, personalize, hear, offer, navigate, make sure that you have a good ending. You do all those things, you're going to have a lot of success. But you didn't come here just for an acronym. You didn't come here to, okay, yeah, I know about testing my phone number and all that. You came for some real tips of the trade. And so I'm going to share with you what I think is the most important thing to successfully calling in a sales context. Every opening, when you get your greeting out there, hi, Mary, this is Chris. Every opening has a question, right? And every time we've ever been called by a salesperson, there's always a question at the end of the opening. We can tell, and more importantly, our prospects can tell, great questions from weaker ones right out of the gate. So most of the time, people offer yes, no questions, right? Common questions. Is this a good time? Hi, this is Chris from Phone Burner, blah, 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 blah. Is now a good time? Yes or no? Do you have a few moments to meet with me or to speak to me, right? Yes, no. How are you solving this problem? That's not a yes, no question, but it's also a question that people, unless they know you a little bit better, you go out there, you give them your pitch, you tell them what we do. Do you currently struggle with ABC problem, right? How are you currently solving it? I don't know you well enough to even know if you're qualified to understand my answer here. I'm not comfortable with that. Do you have a need for X? Yes, no. Right? All of those have been used on us, and maybe at times we've tried to leverage those questions on others. But these questions, I think, belong deeper in a relationship than right out of the gate. And so I want to tell you that I believe that there are better questions that you can use as part of your opening. And if you pay any attention to today's session, this is the time to put your email away, fixate on the monitor here, and start thinking about applying these questions in your script. But I want to get off the phone for a moment, and I want to transition to normal life. I want to share with you some questions that I thought of that when asked, when we're out in the world, we don't bat an eye at. Think about this for a second. You're walking through the mall, you're going through the airport, you're on the street, you're at your kid's school, whatever. There are some non-intrusive things that we ask strangers for all the time. Just general questions. Hey, you have the time, right? Non-intrusive, people don't bat an eye at giving you an answer. Oh, could you give me directions for to how to get to this restaurant, or how do I hit the freeway from where I'm at, right? We ask that all the time. We ask people to assist us with an object. Would you mind opening the door? Could you hold this for me a second? We don't even think twice about asking questions like that. We ask for recommendations. Hey, I'm looking at between these two different places. Would you recommend going here versus going there? We ask for confirmation all the time, non-intrusive. Is this the right way to get to? Is this the right way to do this? Is this the line I'm supposed to be? Hey, would you mind taking a picture? We're here in front of a beautiful scene. Would you mind taking a picture of us? We don't ever bat an eye at asking somebody to do that for us. Information about a service, right? We ask all the time about information about certain services. So, or do you have a quick opinion? Hey, between this and this, what's your thoughts? Or what's your thoughts on this? Why don't we use similar questions in the openings of our call? Why do so many calls, and I don't know what the number is, but I've got to assume it's north of 80% of people asking, is this a good time? Worst question I think that you can ask out of the gate. So, in addition to those questions, then we're going to put in some examples here in a second. There is one secret trick on questions that is an absolute superpower. Absolute superpower. Asking a question in your opening greeting and in your script where the answer is a number. It's way better than yes, no. It will get more dialogue going. It's more informative to you, and it's easier for the prospect to answer, and it helps put people at ease. And if you don't believe me, try it. Next time you're at a dinner party, next time you're in the office and it's you're struggling through dialogue, ask somebody a question that ends in a number. How many times do you go out to eat for lunch every week? As opposed to, do you go out to eat for lunch? Yes. How many times do you go out a week? 3. Oh, really? Do you go to the same place all 3 times, right? Asking questions that end in a number is a superpower, particularly in a call environment where honestly, you don't know a lot about the person that you're calling, and the person that's being called knows very little about you. But asking questions that end in a number is really powerful. We'll show you some examples here shortly. So I want to transition to 2 great openings call examples. And then I'm going to show you how there's 2 ways to win with these openers and no ways to lose. So we're going to talk through a B2B context and then a B2C context. Hi, Joe. My name is Chris. I work for PhoneBurner, which serves salespeople. You appeared in my LinkedIn feed earlier. Looks like you're an expert product marketer. As somebody with 5 years experience as a product marketer, what's the best advice you would give someone looking to get into, name the space, right? Into the solar industry, into the software industry, whatever. Think about this for a second. I know my prospect, appropriate level of personalization, their name, I know their job title because I've done my research as part of the list that I got on there. And I'm not asking them for their time. I'm asking them for just a little bit of advice. And I'm going to use that advice, as you'll see here in a moment, to parlay to go into my offer in terms of how I can help Joe in his position. How many people are going to flat out reject you to not give you just a tidbit of advice for looking to get in to that space? I think very few. I think most people are going to be flattered. Maybe a little bit took off guard that they got a call out of the middle of the day where someone's asking them some advice on that, but you've shown enough decorum in terms of how you've introduced yourself and in your greeting that this is going to be far better than, Joe, do you have 2 minutes? No, I don't. I got to get ready for a meeting. I'm on my break. Give you a B2C example. Hi, Sarah. My name is Chris. I work for PhoneBurner, which helps salespeople be more efficient in their dialing. By chance, do you know what time of year people like yourself think about buying new services? Think about that. Gets her to think a little bit. She's already guarded getting that phone call. Okay, this person's just going to want time or money. But I'm asking a completely different question than what she's expecting from every other call that she's got out there. And I used a little bit of a mesh between B2B and B2C in there. Imagine you sell solar. Imagine you sell internet services. Imagine you sell something that is from a consumer standpoint. Asking, hey, by chance, do you know what time of year people like yourself think about whatever it is that you offer, that type of service, what they're doing? Super powerful. Now, you get 2 ways to win with these, and I don't think you have a way to lose. One, if you go out there and use that advice question, if they give you advice, great. Leverage it and angle it towards your offer. Parlay that. We'll talk about that in a second here. If they don't, say, hey, it's important to me to find someone who might be willing to share their advice. Would you have someone that you would recommend? Most people want to think of themselves as at least some level of competency close to expert. And there'll be maybe another way to reintroduce their thinking to, yeah, I do want to give you a little bit of advice. But if they don't, hopefully that they know somebody that they've learned from, or they can refer you to, and you get yourself a referral out of the deal that you could go after if you're targeting a specific position. On that time of year, do you know what time people think about these types of things? Again, if they give it to you, great, you can leverage it. And if they say they don't know, then ask their opinion about now and why now is a good time to be thinking about that. You would be amazed because now that person's into learning mode without implicitly asking them, hey, do you have a second to hear through this? It's really powerful. And as you get this deck back and you start to think through your own product or service that you're offering, I think that you'll find that that question, particularly around what type of year do people start to evaluate this stuff, is super powerful. Test it out. I would encourage you to do so. You've got no way to lose here. If they say yes, you're going to leverage it and take it into your offer. If they say no, you're going to ask for a referral, or in the second example, you're going to use that as permission to go and tell them why now is such a good time. So transitioning from an opening into an offer. I think that there's a checklist for your offer. If your offer is to get somebody to a meeting, if it is to set that appointment, if it's to review materials that you have out there, whatever that offer is that's part of what your call is, there's a checklist for a great offer. And if you can check one or more of these boxes, your offer is going to be something that's well received, it resonates, and people will take action with. First thing you need to think about is what I'm offering the person on the call something that they will share immediately. They'll share it. They're going to either share it with a colleague, they're going to share it with a spouse, they're going to share it with another interested party. If you can check that box, that whatever it is that you're offering, people will share immediately, you've hit the bar. And if you don't feel that you have that, you should do your research and study and ask, what could I do to enhance this to the point that you would want to share it? Second part of our checklist here is that whatever your offer is, maybe it's some materials that you're giving them, is that people will put it to use. There's nothing worse than getting somebody to agree to accept something that they're not going to put to use. So if you're sending out a 50-page pamphlet and they're not putting it to use, that's no good. So what is it in that offer that people will actually put to use and find utility from out of the gate? Because they find utility out of the gate from you, they associate you immediately as somebody that can help them through their current situation. Third part of a great offer. They're going to think about that after it's been used, right? After they've leveraged it. If you can get people to have some sort of evergreen thinking after it's been used, super powerful. Final part of your checklist is they're going to associate some level of expertise with you after you've provided it. Like, I got this great call from somebody today. They gave me this. I'm going to meet with them next week. Sounds like a really sharp person on the other end of the line that I was talking with. Now, the thing about your offer is really understanding the timing on the other end. We all know as salespeople that the timing of where the buyer is at the point in which we're meeting them is super important. So let me explain what I think timing can do to help you as you navigate your call with your prospect. You've got to know as early on in the call as you possibly can where the timing, the purchase decision is in terms of what that individual's thinking on the other end of the phone. There's 3 stages to it. They're thinking about doing something now. They're thinking about doing something in the near term, maybe three months out or so, or they're a little bit further out. And I'm going to share with you a bit of a framework. If you've been able to tease out where someone is in terms of their thinking, how to get them to take more action with you quickly. And this will influence and help with the scripts that you've developed. So if you get somebody on the phone, maybe you've got a hot lead that's come in and it's clear that they're thinking about now. We want to try to establish what the buyer's mindset is. And we can do that on that first call, or if we have a second call that we're following up on, we want to establish what the buyer's mindset is. So let's say somebody's interested in your service, you call them, and they're bullish about what's going on in the world right now. What you want to be able to do is be prepared to demonstrate how you are going to help them enhance those results that they're currently getting and reinforce their positive outlook. And what you want to be able to do there is you want to be able to use social proof. I'm going to send you a review of 2 or 3 people here that have also benefited from this, who are very excited about what's going on in their space right now. If you've got a buyer who right now shows they're interested, but they're kind of a little bit depressed about the right now, and that they think it's a bit of a slump out there, what you want to be able to do is show yourself as the antidote to what's going on. How what you offer is going to provide them immediate relief, and you want to demonstrate your ability to help them be resilient if they're currently in a situation where they're a little bit sluggish or slumpish in terms of what their anticipation is. And the way that you'll do that really well is be armed with the story. So let's play this through. You get somebody on the phone. You have a great greeting. You've talked about how you want to set that meeting or that appointment up with them, and you get to a place where you've got some rapport going with them. And like, well, how obviously this is a need that you have. How are you feeling? What are your prospects? How are you feeling about right now? It's like, well, things kind of are a little bit in a disarray. Just not too excited about where things are at right now. Then go into how you're going to help provide them immediately relief. And you do that through, I talked to somebody earlier last week that had the same kind of outlook on it. We started to help them and they've immediately seen the results, telling that story. But understand the perspective that people have in terms of, hey, I'm really excited about things, or I don't think things are too good, will really help you align with them and move the conversation in the direction that you need it to go. Near term, right? Next 3 months, somebody feels optimistic about the next 3 months. Align what you're doing to their outlook and how you will help them capitalize on those opportunities, right? I'm glad that you think things are going to be good over the next 3 months. We want to be there along for the ride and help you in the following ways to make sure that you can capitalize on all of those opportunities. And you got a nice ROI calculator or a framework for helping them see the outcomes that they want. People will get really excited about that. If they are unsure about the next 3 months, right? They've demonstrated a need, but they're a bit unsure. Help them by showing that you see the world through their lens, that you understand the risks that they see and how you're going to help them navigate those next 2 or 3 months, right? In the near term, and be armed with outcome data that helps give them the confidence that you're the right partner to bet on as they go forward. And then finally, if your buyer's there and they're like, hey, this is going to be a little bit further out, it's more strategic, but they see potential in the future, you want to be able to demonstrate how what you're doing, your product or your service, can help them deliver on their strategic initiatives, and that working with you is going to be a transformative project or a partnership. And give them a roadmap, right? So somebody, you get them on the phone and they're like, hey, this is something that we want to look at 6 months out, probably. Great. A lot of people like you are really smart. They want to start thinking about things 6 months and ahead, 6 months or ahead. Would it be unreasonable if I shared with you a roadmap of where you are with where you want to be in 6 months? Would it be unreasonable if I kind of shared you with a roadmap on how you can actually get there? Or are they going to say, yes, it's unreasonable? No, they're going to say, no, that's not unreasonable at all. Please share it. Good. I'm going to give it over to you. Hey, can you pull your calendar up? Let's talk in 3 weeks just to make sure that I'm matching your level of urgency to solve that problem. If they're looking out over the future and they think things look a little bit hazy, you are in a unique position in that you can remove uncertainty. You could be, and your product or your service could be the ingredient that could remove that uncertainty and get them bullish about a longer term horizon that's successful for them. And convey, you're not going to go about this alone. And the way that you do that is you demonstrate how your partnership is going to remove that uncertainty on a go forward basis. So take all those things, you put great endings together. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's so important on these calls. You have a wonderful greeting, you have a nice offer, you understand kind of the time element of it and how you're going to navigate a person's perspective on their time horizon. But you want to end that call without any doubt that you get some value and you've given some value. So make sure that those next steps are clearly lined out and agreed on, ideally with a timeline. I'll call you next week is not as good as, can I call you Thursday next week? Another thing, do not allow that call to end unless you can confirm that you've built some initial trust with the person on the other side. A lot of that trust gets built through that arc that we talked about earlier, right? With a great opening, good offer, and all those other things. But at the end of the day, if we can establish some trust with somebody, effectively a stranger that we're reaching out to, the likelihood of them transacting with you in the future is much higher, as opposed to just simply building rapport with somebody. If they can trust you because of the way that you've scripted and put together the flow of that call, get that trust out there, much higher likelihood you're going to be successful going forward. Big one. If there is no opportunity, always, please ask for a referral for somebody else that might be able to benefit from what you offer. Also get additional contact information. Hey, can I verify your email? Would it be unreasonable to get your email so I can forward you these things? And one secret weapon here that I would encourage you to use if you don't already. Let's say you've tried to call somebody 4 or 5 times. You've tried emailing them 4 or 5 times. It's a prospect you absolutely want to get into. Please, do not be afraid of creating a calendar event for them. Send them a calendar information. You would be shocked how often a calendar invite actually gets a response and gets somebody to show up. Make sure that you do follow up. Impeccable follow-up. I'm going to send you what I promised earlier. So that perfect script, great greeting. We talked about some examples of how to have a really good greeting, right? We talked about great questions, the best questions, having those best questions. We talked about good offers, what's necessary for an offer to be exceptional. We talked about good endings, but I would encourage you again, focus on the great first question that you can use. That's where the power is. If everybody had the best question, you are going to have sensational results. I promise you. And think about the first question you're asking in your scripts and your calls today and what you can do based on what we talked about to maybe possibly enhance that. And if you do that, I'm quite confident you get that right. Success is going to follow you like your shadow. All right, Rupalin, that's all I've got.
That's amazing, Chris. Thank you so much for all of this fantastic content on how to update your outbound calling. So we do have some upcoming CPSA events that I'll just touch on briefly before we get to the Q&A. We have our strategic account management online course starting June 17th. Our next webinar in partnership with Maximizer is also going to be held on June 19th on revamping your revenue sales funnel strategies for the second half of 2024, as well as FOSO, Fundamentals of Selling Online, being held on June 24th until August 18th for CPSA events. We will get started with our Q&A now. Please feel free to enter any of your questions that you may have on today's content in the chat here, or feel free to raise your hand. Arash, I have you with your awesome. Go ahead and ask your question if you don't mind.
Hey, Chris, great presentation. Big fan of Phone Burner. Been following you guys for some time, so really excited to meet you and hear your great presentation. A lot of really great advice, especially around the importance of asking calibrated and great question. My question to you is, what are your thoughts on the permission-based openers, where you introduce yourself as, you know, we've never spoken to one another, I'm really reaching out for your help. Do you have like a second for me to tell you what I'm calling you about as an initial opener, and then follow that to that really great calibrated question that obviously opens the floodgate to a great conversation if it's the right question?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Thanks for your nice words about Phone Burner. My honest answer is I think that it depends. It depends a lot on your personality. Some people feel like I've really got to get that initial thumbs up that I'm okay to proceed here. And so a permission-based opening creates that opportunity in that window. So it depends on, you know, some people just aren't going to be bullish enough to go out there and ask that initial question out of the gate. What I would encourage is that you ruthlessly test what works for you. Permission-based openers work really well for some people. Others, they don't. I think one of the things, you know, I've studied permission-based openings for quite some time. I'm assuming you have as well. And what struck me is that outside of the phone call, there's not really a lot of places where permission-based openings actually exist in our lives, right? Whereas some of those additional questions that I put out there, those are everywhere, right? So there's a context switch that I think you and the person that you're reaching out to immediately go, okay, I'm more comfortable with this because I could have been asked this very same thing on the street 5 minutes ago. Whereas we're not stopping somebody on the street and saying, hey, may I have a minute or two to show you something? That on the street is going to get you a flat no. Like I'm busy, I'm on my route. As opposed to stopping somebody on the street and asking them for direction or asking them for a little bit of advice. People can spare advice more than they can spare time. People can, you know, and so I think if you keep that in mind, it is almost a permission-based opening, but it's a slightly nuanced permission that you're asking for.
Great, thanks for the insight. Appreciate it.
Sure.
That was a good question, Arash.
Great.
Next one here, is there ever a time that you should walk away from a prospect?
I have a hard and fast rule that I followed my whole career as a salesperson, and that I encourage all of our salespeople to follow. And it's this: you walk away from a business prospect when you realize that there's no business problem to be solved. Walk away, qualify it out, get out. If you can't solve a problem for them, get out. The worst thing that you can do is hold that prospect in your opportunity list or in your contact list when you can't solve a problem for them. So I'll give you an example. You know, maybe you sell solar systems, and you're calling, and the person says, well, you know, I've got one that's scheduled to be installed next week. We've already put our deposit down. You're not going to solve a problem for them. Right? They've already done it at that point. You can certainly leave them the information to get back in touch with you if the provider that they're going with is a bozo and doesn't do what they say they're going to do. But there's no business problem to be solved. So if you can't solve a business problem for somebody, qualify them out. Take them off your list.
Thanks, Chris. Our next question here is from Albert, and I really like how specific this one is. My role involves teaching clinic owners and their employees how to follow up with leads generated through online lead forms. Big question, but if I have limited time to introduce someone with minimal sales experience to making outbound calls to leads that have opted into a call, what would the most key points to focus what would be the most key points to focus on with them? For example, when someone who doesn't see themselves as a salesperson, what should they do to get some initial confidence and early wins?
Oh, that's a great question. That's an awesome question. I love the fact that you're teaching these owners and their employees how to do this, because if they don't have teachers, they're going to go out there and they're going to fail miserably. So Albert, keep up the good work there. This sounds silly, but I'm going to tell you the truth, because I've had similar experience here. Teach them how to smile when they make that phone call. And it's really true, because that smile is going to come through. If you think about a phone call end to end, the way that we communicate with each other, this is unbelievable. But over 60% of the way that we interact with each other is about tone. 30% or so is what we say, maybe. More likely body language, and what we say is even smaller. But tone is so critical. So I think teaching them how to smile when they're talking to somebody. Hey, thanks for filling out the lead form. It's great to have you, Albert. Interested in what we're doing. I'd like to walk you through 4 or 5 things, blah, 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 blah. Teach them to smile when they're making that call. And you'll be amazed at what the success is between an agent that does that and somebody who doesn't. That's cold, shuttered, and all that, because that tone's going to come through that phone call, because you don't have body language to lean into. So smiling helps you have a more pleasant tone. And I think that's one thing that you can teach people that are not necessarily as comfortable or don't think of themselves as salespeople. The other thing, Albert, that I would encourage you to think through, in addition to teaching them to smile, is the more that you can simplify the structure of that script, the better. If you give somebody too exotic of a script, or too many things that they've got to go through, particularly as they're getting started, they're going to get overwhelmed. And what happens when we get overwhelmed? We don't get dopamine hits. And dopamine hits are what we rely on to really continue to go forward with what we're doing. And so simplifying the structure is going to allow them to get those dopamine hits, because somebody's raised their hand. And I think the last thing I would tell you is, you've got the most enviable sales job on the planet. Somebody has raised their hand indicating they want to talk to you. That's a really lucky position to be in. So hopefully that's helpful. But if you ever want to go offline and talk more about that stuff, it's certainly very much an interest of mine.
I would love to. Thanks for that. That's an awesome answer. Really appreciate that.
You got it.
We have some good feedback on that, actually, Chris. Jen has just said, I agree so much with the smile. I also have heard to stand up while talking. I personally have also been told to put a mirror by your webcam just to make sure that you are smiling all the time. Arash, good comment here. Holding a pen in your mouth before making a call can help someone smile. That's great. A question here from Dawn. How do you deal with I feel like this is the never-ending problem. How do you deal with a prospect who has a problem? You've presented a solution that solves their problem, and they like the solution but won't respond after receiving follow-up affirmation and fees, both email and calls?
There's 2 things I would recommend. One, Don, I have tremendous empathy for you. That's so frustrating. One is, I love to get people to answer no rather than yes. So powerful. So I'll send something like, is it unreasonable for us to continue talking? Is it unreasonable for us to find another 5 minutes? Is it unreasonable? And most of the time people, you know what they'll say? If they say yes, okay, it's unreasonable. Well, why is it unreasonable? You at least owe me an explanation of why it's unreasonable. So I like to use questions, that are a little bit different. That unreasonable one is super powerful. There's another school of thought out there that you send the 1-line email, which is, are you no longer interested in this? And then that's basically the breakup. I've seen that work as well. most of the time, I think when we've gotten somebody to a point where they've not been responsive, and if it's a pattern, Don, that has happened over time, I would encourage us to think a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is what you experience at the end largely is determined by what you do at the beginning. Right? That person, unless heaven forbid, some terrible accident happened to them, did not just go off the rails. There was something that we missed out on earlier in the sales process, right? In terms of the extent to which the problem existed or whatever, that would allow them to go off. And so, Don, I'm going to give you a supercharged bit of advice here, and this is for everybody. And Rebecca on my team here will laugh when she hears me say that, but this, guys, this is good. Always know what's at stake. Think about it. If nothing can be gained and nothing's going to be lost, there's no impetus for action. So in that situation, Don, where we've got somebody that's gone unresponsive, the first question I'm asking myself was, what was at stake? Okay, well, what was at stake? They're not going to get promoted, and they want to get promoted, right? I uncovered that from that person. What was at stake? They're going to miss their quarterly numbers. What was at stake? They were going to lose 5% of their market share. That huge loss. If you know what's at stake earlier on in the process, you're not going to get unresponsive people. Because why? You're going to be like, there's no business problem for me to solve here. There's nothing at stake at all. I'm going to qualify them out, and I'm going to move on to somebody where there's more at stake. If you hear anything from me, know what's at stake in all your deals. If there's nothing to be gained and nothing to lose, people aren't going to move forward. They're just not. They're going to be unresponsive, or the worst thing is they're going to grin you along and lead you along that something is going to be there, and then it's not, right? Because there's no impetus to actually buy. That's a great question. I love that question.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you so much to everybody for these great questions. We are at time now, but Harnisha, I know that you did ask a question. I'm wondering if, Chris, are you okay to answer this question, or do you want me to email this question to you from Harnisha from that? Okay, so the question here is, thanks, Chris. I'm struggling with the accents as a newcomer, and some people don't seem to talk to you right after they hear you. I'm having difficulty in understanding, but I'm already working on my accent. I'd like to know your advice.
Keep working at it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my number one bit of advice is keep working at it. We have a large number of people that use our platform that call in from different markets where the accent is something that can be difficult for others to understand. And I think what I've heard from some of our users that I've become friends with, they say people don't take me serious because I've got this accent. And so what I would encourage you to do is continue to work on it. And the way that we've coached some of our users is, what are the handful of words that are out there that, struggle to be enunciated properly, and just nail those. Get those couple of words that are down and keep practicing on it. And, what I will tell you that I believe firmly in is that if what you're saying is golden, if you have an accent and you're bringing value to somebody, they could care less, right? So in addition to just working on some of those things that just might be harder from an auditory standpoint to translate and understand, if you've got a great script, you've got some great questions that you're putting in there like we talked about earlier today, I'm hopeful that those will help enhance the results that you need. And I applaud you for working hard on it. I know that's tough.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thanks so much to everybody who's joined us and stayed on the call today. Huge thanks to everybody for spending an hour with us. Wishing everybody a great sales day today and a great sales calling day. Just to follow up, this session has been recorded. Hang tight. It'll be a couple days until it is all sent over to you, but I know everybody will want it. Huge thanks again to Chris for all this fantastic and invaluable content. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you all soon.
All right, go pick up the phone, guys. Good luck.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Thank you.
Good luck,
Bye.
everyone.
Awesome, Chris.